Cool. All right, man. Well, yeah. Hey, thanks for doing this. It's yeah, been a long time since I've chatted with you. Been, I think I can't even remember what year I finished at SAE. I believe it was um maybe 2010.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah, I
been
was thinking
since.
it's over a decade, surely. I'd moved to Dubai in 2012, so it had to be before then.
Right. Yeah. How was Dubai?
Uh, Interesting. Um, Big learning curve. A lot of fun. Hard to leave. I know a lot
Hmm.
of expats don't actually get out of there.
Mm,
Get addicted to no tax and sorry, no income tax anyway, and find it
right.
difficult to come back. But yeah, I did 2 years and then moved back to Byron.
Okay.
Um,
Cool. And you were like running the SAE out there.
Yeah, it was the same as Sydney. So I was the academic coordinator in Sydney, and then the same in Dubai, and then the same in Byron. Did a
Gotcha.
year in Byron, and then they sent me to San Fran for a year to do some project management stuff. And that was 2016, and that's when I started this gig. So I'm still in the same role since 2016.
Gotcha. You're working at the SAE in San Francisco, you said?
Yeah, all of 2016 basically as a project manager, developing curriculum for the new degrees and associate degrees back then. And
Gotcha.
then
So you
while I was there, I started this role.
Okay, so you probably know Ivo Ivanov, yeah?
I don't. No.
Okay. So he
Was
used
he
to,
involved in expression?
yeah, he used to run it. He was one of the first, actually, it was in 2012, I think it was like one of the first tours I did of America. Once I like got out of SAE, I basically started releasing music and then touring. Um, and yeah, one of the first people I met in San Francisco was him, and he now runs a plugin company called Glitch Machines. He works with like Richard Devine and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I think expression closed and SAE purchased them after they'd closed,
Mm.
kind of like a lifeline, and then ran them for a while. Um, but no, I don't. I know the name. I never met him. I never saw him on campus or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. The other two people I know there who I believe they worked at Expression was Josh Hinden from Twisted Tools, and who was the other person I knew there? Brian Triphonic. Yeah, Brian Trifon, who has this company now called Finishing Move, I think, that they wrote all the music for like Halo and stuff.
It's a great company name. I don't know either of those
Yeah.
guys. I definitely remember those names though, if I did. So
Nice. Cool, man. Yeah. So wait, so you're currently at working at SAE in Sydney now?
technically I'm based in Byron Bay, but I
Mm.
live in my hometown in Port Macquarie,
Oh, cool.
halfway between Sydney and Byron. So I was one of the first, well, I think it was the first SAE employee to work 100% remotely, because all of my contacts at work, everyone I work with is in another country essentially. So
Mm.
remote doesn't make a huge difference to me. I do a lot of weekends and strange hours.
Right.
Um,
And I
but
imagine at this point, like everyone's um pretty used to working remote after the pandemic and stuff, right?
yeah, it depends if you're talking about admin or teaching. But yes, it's been difficult. A lot of our campuses have struggled overseas to convince students to come back to campus. They've had a taste of remote and they want it to continue no matter what, um,
Yeah, I
which
would have.
is
Oh, sorry, go on.
which is difficult for programs like audio where there's specialist equipment that we want them to get their hands on, but different for
Yeah,
animation and games, perhaps.
right. Yeah, I would have honestly kind of liked that for a lot of the classes I was doing when I was at SE. I was living out at Windsor and I was studying in Sydney. So the train ride was about an hour and a half each way. So I was doing 3 hours of train 4 or 5 times a week. So if I had a class at 9 a.m., I had to wake my ass up at 5:30 a.m., get on a 6 a.m. train or something like that. And then I'm fucking horrible at sleeping. I've always like, it's not like I'm an insomniac. I'm just bad at going to bed. Like I'm bad at like, I'm bad at staying up and working and like getting, and being like, oh fuck, it's 3 a.m. I got to go to sleep. And then, so I was like, I was just fucking wrecked the entire time I was doing SAE basically.
I remember you. I remember you had to travel a lot.
Mhm.
I remember not a lot about every student, but I remember you had to travel a lot
Yeah.
to get there.
Yeah, it was horrible. But worth it. Yeah, so I was reading on your website that you rebuilt at least one, but possibly more mixing consoles in a virtual environment for the sake of students being able to like kind of understand them and operate them virtually. How'd that work? Because like again, that would have been an amazing thing to have when I was going to SE, because I remember trying to get like studio time back then. It was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it started back then. It started when you were at SAE in kind of 2009, 2010. I started using Max MSP software, which is just called Max now. I was forced to use it as part of my master's research. We built listening test interfaces, like compare A to B and adjust this. That interface was built in Max at Sydney Uni, so I had to learn how to use Max to do those, to build those experiments. And then I started messing around with it and developing just little interactive, you wouldn't even call them apps, just little interactive bits of software to demonstrate things like phase cancellation and just the principles of sound and signal processing. And nothing I made back then was anything close to the console I developed recently. But I made a prototype in, I think it was 2018, 2019, little Behringer desk. I just wanted to take a single photo of a console, like a high res photo, and then edit it, cut out all the dials, cut out all the switches, or just extract them, and then paste them back in Max and program it to work. So the larger consoles you're talking about, there was the Audient was released in October 2020, Audient ASP 4816 simulator. So we contacted Audient and they were really helpful and really excited about the idea and sent us some high res photos. You need quite specific photos of the console, taken at quite a distance with a zoom lens to get rid of any perspective and that kind of thing. Audient were nice enough to take every single dial and fader off the ASP 4816 and photograph it without dials or faders, which saves me a lot of work. But essentially, you just take a photo of a console and then in Photoshop or whatever, you extract a dial, a single image of each different colored dial, each fader, each switch in the on and off state, each light in the on and off state. And then for the dials, I used software called Knobman at the time, which rotates PNGs or JPEGs. Because if you get a JPEG of a dial with the indicator at vertical at 12 o'clock, and then you rotate it in your graphics software, it loses quality because it's JPEG, because it's compressed anyway. So Knobman kind of I think it oversamples it and then rotates it. So you take one image of a dial and Knobman spits out 270 images, one for each degree of rotation. And then you import that long horizontal PNG of 270 different image pictures into Max, and then you can animate it as a knob. So you basically put a giant photo of the console in Max, and then over that you put the knobs, and they animate, they can turn, and then you generate two different image states for the switch, the on and the off in Photoshop, and the light, the on and the off, and then you put them into Max. So now you've got something that visually looks like a console that works, but it doesn't do any audio processing. So then you've got to kind of jump under the hood and do all the audio processing, which was easier with a schematic of the console. So the prototype I did in sort of 2018, 2019 was just a virtual console, and that's it, which was kind of limited in terms of its usage. But for the Audient and then the Mackie that came after, for the Audient and the Mackie that came after, I added in sort of additional learning and teaching materials, so interactive tutorials and a feature where if you hover your mouse over different sections of the console, it tells you what it does. It was quite a challenge actually to find a manufacturer who was interested in the idea of making a virtual simulation. I'd been contacting manufacturers since maybe 2017, and none of them were interested in what they saw as a product that was competition to their physical console.
Right.
So
But that's
in
not
their
why you're
mind,
building it, right? Like you're building it for educational purposes, not to sell it to somebody to be like, here's a virtual version of the console so you don't have to buy the physical one.
no, and you would never mix a track on the virtual
Yeah.
consoles I made. You just use a
Right.
DAW. Like it's not suitable. It's such a headache to do it that way.
Right. And
You
by the
can
sounds
record the
of
outputs of them, but
yeah, and by the sounds it runs in like as a max patch, right?
yeah, it's a standalone Mac application. In Macs, you can export anything you build as a standalone application. So, for example, users that download the apps, they don't need to have Macs on their machine.
And just
It's like a
spits it out
native
as
runtime.
a DMG or
Yep, it's a dot app, but you wrap it up as a DMG.
gotcha.
It's a native runtime app that I think it contains a runtime version of Macs in the app itself,
Mm.
but the end story is that the user doesn't need Macs to run it. You just need a Mac. It doesn't work on mobile devices. Not that you're going to scroll across a console on your iPhone, but
Right. Okay. So basically if like you're a student at SE, you just like have access to a repository somewhere and you can download this app to
you
learn.
don't need to be a student at SAE. It's
Mm.
publicly and freely available. We wanted to make it that way from day one. So you can go to the SAE Australia website and there's a download link for the Audient ASP 4816 and the Mackie 1604 VLZ4. All you need is a Mac. They're SAE branded. There's an SAE logo on them, but anyone is free to use them, download them, use them as training materials at their school or not.
Man, I love that colleges do this these days. Like if you go to the Berkeley website, you can do like a full-on jazz degree basically for free. And if you go to the MIT website, you can do like all the MIT courses for free. It's insane, like the amount of learning materials that are available from colleges these days. And then on top of that, you got YouTube these days, which is insane. Like I remember
Yeah, I remember
back
when
in
I
the
was
day.
in
Sorry,
when I
go
was
on.
in Dubai, I was looking at the MOOCs for I can't remember what I think it was MIT, and they had footage of one of the first digital audio lectures. With the guy with the brown suit and the tie on the giant sliding chalkboards doing all the digital audio theory, and I just loved it. I couldn't believe we had access to that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. I feel like at this point you can basically get a college degree almost off just online if you have the drive to do it. I think a big part of it is it's hard, I think, when you're starting out learning to know like where to focus your learning to begin with, so you can kind of pick up um, things in a linear fashion to where they actually make sense, because there's a lot of information, I think, where like if you're trying to learn some crap about acoustics before you learn anything about like how the harmonic series works or something like that, it might be a little difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult to know what you don't know in terms of what's the assumed knowledge before this to make that kind of concept set and gel, and then get you thinking about sort of higher order ideas. As you said, without those fundamentals, it's a challenge. You'll get there. It'll just take you a really long time.
Right. Yeah. Before things start to like click it together. And because I find like once I got to sort of not even the end of SAE, it was like years and years after that. It was like only then that shit sort of all started to click together. And I was like, oh, this shit is actually really simple. If you just like, once you understand like a bunch of concepts and they all just sort of make sense together.
That's great to hear. I remember the day when it all kind of clicked together, and for me in terms of audio and just all of that theory learning about sine waves and phase and all that kind of stuff, and it just one day it just kind of set and made sense, and then everything that came after it made much more sense in terms of just a real foundational understanding, and it hasn't left me since. So
right, that's at the point I think where you can like actually read a book about like a piece of software or about a concept in audio, and it actually is worth doing. I feel like when I first started studying, I was like, reading some of the suggested books, and I was just like, man, this is like not at all helpful. It's like trying to read shit and like there's a bunch of key terms I don't understand and stuff. It seems like a waste of time.
I think a lot of people need to. We don't really know when we're students that we all learn really differently, and for some people, reading a book is an absolutely fantastic way, or for some people, sitting through a 3-hour lecture is a great way to learn, and they instantly start thinking about higher order concepts and extrapolating ideas just by passively receiving information. And then other students, there's no worse way to learn. They need to learn by doing. which everyone does, but I think that was the difference when you're learning those first order principles about sound theory and that type of thing. It's the application of them and thinking through problems. That's really where you learn the relationships between all these different things, and not just being told about them or reading about them.
Yeah. So when I was at SAE, one of the things that, I don't know if it's changed or not, was that like Pro Tools was kind of touted as the be all and end all DAW, and a lot of the other DAWs like Fruity Loop Studio and Ableton Live were kind of looked at as like toys, and they weren't looked at as kind of like serious pieces of software. Is that still the case there, or is it kind of
No, I think the term they use is DAW agnostic. It's
okay.
not only the Pro Tools Club, and for a lot of the student projects that you work on, we don't care what you'd use to make it. It's not relevant. And the modules are certainly less, if at all, Pro Tools focused. I think some of the earlier ones might have even been named around Pro Tools or been linked directly to a Pro Tools certification. But these days it's DAW agnostic. The relevance isn't there. It's up to the student.
Yeah, when I was there, I was expected to own a fucking little M-Box Mini so I could use Pro Tools, and I thought it was the most cumbersome program for.
Was that the little blue one?
Yeah, it was like this little shitty fucking thing.
And now there's just piles of them in a cupboard somewhere. There's just thousands of M-Box Minis lying around the world.
Yeah, the best thing I ever got out of it was like a weird buffer error thing. It was just making a bunch of weird noise, and I just sampled it.
Yep. Yeah, I remember plugging those things in and them not syncing properly. Yeah, things have changed a lot, and not just at SAE in terms of education. The approach is, the kind of standard these days is project-based learning and holistic assessment. I mean, SAE Australia doesn't even have lectures anymore, and there's no exams. It's a different world compared to what it was sort of over a decade ago.
Yeah,
and a lot of the old people that were lecturing back then are still with us, and a lot of them aren't. So
yeah, is Bryony and Craig still at SAE in Sydney?
I think Bryony is. I think Craig's moved on. Nice. But again, I don't actually work in Australia, which is the strange thing. I mean,
gotcha.
I'm not involved with SAE Australia at all. I just kind of live here and work in a strange part of the business that deals with international campuses. But having said that, I do teach in their master's program once a year. Coincidentally, I teach Max programming in Max for audio, so that's handy.
Nice. Yeah, I got into Max a little bit because I'm an Ableton user, and Max is now pretty integrated with Ableton using Max for Live. So basically, you can like just open like a little plugin type thing, just as it would be an audio effect or MIDI effect, and then it just has like a 2 in, 2 out, and
2 in, 2 out,
playground, and you can just do whatever you want within that playground. It's funny. I was dating a JavaScript developer for a while, and she was like, "Oh, I want to. Do you know about Splitter? It's this thing that was developed by." So it's this thing that was developed by Deezer, and I think it's using, I don't know, like DMux or something like that. And basically, it's like one of those stem separation softwares. So you are able to like feed a WAV file into it, and it spits out 4 files, like drums, other vocals, and something like that. And it works pretty well. And she was like, "Oh, I want to use Splitter, but have it just available as like a little plugin in Ableton." But she didn't know how to use Max, but she was really good at JavaScript because she's a programmer. So she basically just used the Node.js object. So basically the plugin was just 2 in, 2 out with a Node.js object in the middle. It just goes in, runs a bunch of JavaScript, and then goes out.
Brilliant. Yeah, there's people that, I mean, Max, even looking at the consoles that I developed, there's not a line of code in any of it. But there's people that use Max and just strictly code in it, and then there's people that live in combinations of both worlds. It's quite accessible in terms of getting a prototype up and running quickly. But I've helped people develop a few things in Max for Live. As you said, with the 2 in and 2 out, it's simple.
Yeah, have you messed around at all with like the Juice framework or any C++ stuff?
No, is the short answer. Juice is an integral part of Max and part of the software that I develop, but I don't have any direct involvement with it. It's all done for me in the back end. But no, I intentionally don't dabble in those worlds because I don't need to at this stage. But now I've said that publicly, I'm sure I'm going to have to.
Yeah, I feel like every time I try to get into something coding based, or try to develop my live show more by getting into something like Blender or Unreal or some shit like that, I'm like, this is just I'm gonna write less music because of this. So I try to not. But yeah, let's talk about the piece of software that you built, because I actually have a lot of questions about it. So I guess I'll just give people a quick rundown of what I see it to be as a user. So it's called Freakia, and it seems like the idea is you install an app that currently just runs on Mac. It's able to hijack your Spotify input or Tidal input or whatever, or your system audio input. And then it basically has 3 buttons on it: question, response, and answer, or something like that. And basically you hit question, it applies a EQ setting to the input that you're listening to. So it's whatever you listen to Spotify, you hit question, it applies an EQ setting to it. You can't see what that EQ setting is, and you have to guess what it is, and then you hit that's my response, that's what I think it is. Then it tells you if you're correct or not, and you have like some difficulty settings. I believe easy is just frequency, medium is like frequency and how much of that frequency, like, is there less of it or more of it, and then hard mode is like frequency, how much of it there is, and then the quality factor of it. Is that basically correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's called, I guess you would call the category of software technical ear training. So it's a technical ear training software that focuses on equalization. There's technically training software that's compression and reverb identification and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it's a standalone app for a Mac only at this stage. You can also drag in your own audio files as well if you don't want to hijack a system input. And yeah, it essentially presents random, in the beginning anyway, random questions where here's the flat signal, here's the EQ'd signal, here's your guess. So your role is, it depends on the mode, but in the matching mode, your role is just to match the question to your response. There's other modes where you need to remove the EQ that's been applied. And then for many of these modes, there's a from memory option. So matching from memory, here's the bypassed, here's the EQ'd. You can never hear either of those again. Now you need to match it from your memory, so you can't jump back to the EQ'd version and do that.
It's actually useful.
And then there's, sorry,
I was gonna say that's actually useful, because if you're like soloing shit all the time in a session, it's kind of good to have that sort of memory, right?
Yeah, and there's a mode called absolute identification, which you never get to hear your response. So here's the bypassed, here's the EQ'd. Set the settings so they match what EQ has been applied, but you're not going to hear your settings.
Right. Yeah, because it's kind of
the hardest.
Almost, yeah, totally. Because if you're A Bing, it's like your brain is incredibly good at playing spot the difference. So it's
100%. So it gets more difficult when you've got to do that via memory. It gets more difficult when you've got to remove the EQ that's been applied as opposed to strictly match it. You can choose just to train on frequencies, just to train on gain, just to train on Q, or any combination of any of those, boosts only, cuts only, boosts and cuts. And then you can control how difficult it is, meaning how many frequency options. Sort of, we start at 2 octave, or 1/3 octave, depending on how difficult you want to make it. So the hardest you could make it would be doing 3rd octave frequencies, 1 dB gain increments, boost and cuts, and a range of 12 different Q values. And then you set that to the absolute identification mode, and it's very, very difficult to do.
Right. That's like mastering engineer shit, right? It's like,
yeah, one of the first people that purchased it was a mastering engineer over in Germany who said you need to do 0.1 dB increments because this is too easy.
Ridiculous. Whatever.
Yeah, I almost wanted to ask him to record his screen and send it to me.
Yeah, it's like, who the fuck is hearing that shit?
And you can hide when you adjust the controls, you'll see the graph of the EQ change. You can hide that if you don't want to stare at EQ curves. But it stores your performance over time. So
Mm.
after a while, after a couple of sessions, you can engage the adaptive training mode, and it will analyze your performance to date and, to put it simply, give you less of the questions you've got correct and give you
Mm.
more of the questions you've got wrong.
Right. So you're like actually getting better at the shit you're bad at.
Yeah, instead of just presenting you 1K, if you keep getting that boost correct, it will just present that less and less and less, and then the wrong ones more and more until that sort of balances out.
Mm.
The other unique feature about it, which was really the focus of my PhD, is the ability to turn off audio when you're sweeping throughout the spectrum. So there's kind of two different schools of thought of how you should learn to use an EQ. One of them is that you do a narrow boost and then you sweep it around until you find what you want, and then you make an adjustment. And then the other approach is you don't do that. You guess what you want in terms of frequency, you guess what you want in terms of gain, and then you engage it and see if you're correct. If you weren't, you immediately disengage it and then guess again. And you don't expose yourself to the sweeping throughout the spectrum.
Mm.
So Frequia has a button where when you adjust the control, if you turn sweeping off, it will mute the output if you're in the middle of any type of adjustment. And then only when you let go of the controls, it'll play audio back for you.
Mm. Do you think there's a problem with the EQ sweeping method?
My PhD will tell you there's no empirical evidence to support either method.
Okay.
The argument is that it exposes you to a whole lot of wrong frequencies, but I think if you asked audio engineers how they learnt, they either won't remember or they'll tell you they just used a console in the studio or a DAW and eventually learnt. Not a lot of people actually remember the specific method or even if they used one, but me personally, it would have been a mix of both. It's more intuitive, I think, to sweep around when you're learning. But I think a combination of both is still used. I'm pretty accurate with my EQing these days, but I'm still going to maybe not land on exactly where I need it and need to tweak it once I'm there. And I'm certainly not going to disengage the EQ while I make fine adjustments and then re-engage it again so I don't expose my ears to these supposedly wrong frequencies. But I read about it in a book by Michael Stavro called Mixing with Your Mind, where he was adamant that you do not sweep under any circumstances throughout the spectrum, because in his mind, it's the equivalent to a pianist playing all the different notes off the piano until they find the right one. I'm not sure that's a great analogy, but
it's also like fine is if you're listening to jazz or whatever, right?
Yeah. His book inspired me to do research into this because there wasn't any, and just investigate those two different modes of how to train a student to use an EQ. So I built an ear training program where half the participants could sweep throughout the spectrum when using the ear training program and half of them couldn't. And then you need to establish, well, how do you know if the ear training program worked? Like, what performance are you measuring? So I had to develop these tests of sensitivity. So our theory was that when you train on an ear training program, you will get better at you'll become more sensitive to adjustments in timbre, essentially. If you compared your performance at the beginning to the end. That was the theory that we were running with. So we developed several tests of sensitivity to timbre and tested students before they did the training and then at the end to see if there was any difference, and then compared the sweeping group versus the non-sweeping group to compare between those two groups to see, was there any difference in improvement in sensitivity to timbre between the group that was allowed to sweep and the group that wasn't. And the answer was there wasn't any difference between those two. So there's certainly no experimental evidence out there that one is better than the other. There's lots of people who have really strong opinions either way in audio engineering texts and literature, but there's really no evidence behind it.
Wouldn't the same argument be that listening to incredibly harmonically rich music be applying a similar type of damage to your psyche or your perception of frequencies versus listening to very harmonically not like just, for let's say you're listening to some weird fucking noise music that's just like a few sine waves at given frequencies?
Yeah, it's an interesting argument that
it sounds like the argument is like exposure to any frequency other than the one that it sounds like you want to isolate in this one particular mixing exercise that you're doing, or this mix down or master, whatever it is that you're doing, is detrimental.
Yes, that's the argument.
Which
And
sounds
it's certainly not
ridiculous.
an argument around efficiency, because
Right.
sweeping is faster for
Or I mean, at this
novice
point, you
audio
have like,
engineers.
right. Or I mean, at this point, like the technology is insane. Like you just put Soothe on it and just turn the depth control up, and it'll basically remove resonances until you have a completely flat spectrum. So it's like, why not just
Yeah,
do that?
well, now we're talking about whether or not it's relevant to have those skills, I guess. But
Right.
there's passionate stances around which of those two, sweep or non-sweep methods, are appropriate, and they're most likely linked to how the person learned themselves. But if the goal is to train students to develop an internal long-term memory for the sound of certain frequencies, what's the most efficient way we can do that? And that's what we were interested in looking in. But we didn't find any difference between whether you sweep around or whether you make an educated guess and then engage it and then turn it off if you're wrong and try again. So yeah, there's no evidence of the quote unquote detrimental damage of exposing yourself to this range of frequencies while sweeping.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it would be a sad life if you like truly believed in that and you're like, I can't go outside basically because that will expose me to all sorts of frequencies.
Yeah, it doesn't add up,
Yeah.
because you would have been exposed to every frequency in the spectrum already anyway, all
Right.
the time,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
not even paying attention to it. So I think it just seemed inefficient to people, and that's where the critique came from. But or maybe it seemed unprofessional, and that you should know what your frequencies are, and you shouldn't, an engineer sweeping through the spectrum to find what they're after is a sign that they're unprofessional and they need more training, which is just horseshit.
Right. Essentially what they're saying is that you should just have insanely good relative pitch, I think, right?
From the
Because
beginning.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, you like, as far as I know, you can't train absolute pitch. Like it's something that's just developed when you're, in your early infant years, based on like when your brain is still in that state of like plasticity. I think it gets developed a lot in Asian countries because they have tonal languages. It also gets developed a lot around like jazz musicians and classical musicians, or people whose parents were jazz and classical musicians and were playing them like very high information music with like tons of different keys and shit going on all the time. It seems like they're the people who develop absolute pitch the most, and it seems to me, from what I've seen, that it's really hard to develop later in life. But I have a bunch of friends who have crazy relative pitch. Like I have one friend who's able to whistle, like he whistles a sweep, he goes like, and he knows that top note that he can hit with a whistle is a C, and then he just is able to really quickly figure out what key a track is in or whatever he's doing from there.
It'd be interesting to have that version in the spectrum where, if you've got perfect pitch, it's an A.
Right. Well, I have a friend who's like this as well. He's like, he has absolute pitch, and he's had it from a young age because his parents were jazz musicians and made him play piano from a young age, and he's pretty much assimilated it to frequency recognition. It's really crazy. Like I'll be writing music. Oh, I've only been in the studio with him once, but I was in the studio with him for 3 weeks, and yeah, he'll be listening to something. He's like, oh, that snare has too much like A sharp in it. And he just like knows whatever frequency that roughly is and is able to just remove it. And you're like, holy shit, that just like fixed the mix. It would have taken me a while to figure out.
Because they know which A as well, right? They don't just know that it's an A.
Yeah, they know it's like what octave it is. And
yeah, because that would be frustrating in the studio where it's got too much of some multiple of 300 hertz. I can't tell you if it's 150, 300, 6 or 12, but it's a multiple of that.
Right. Yeah. How much of mixing and mastering do you think is like this technical ear training based stuff, or this like, yeah, this technical kind of approach versus like a personal preference in these domains? Because I quite often feel like mix downs, for me at least, are almost like artistic choices most of the time, rather than and I feel like the reason for that is because I tried to take the other approach kind of when I got out of uni, and then for a long time after that I was like, oh no, mix downs like have to be done this certain way. Like you can't throw like for instance, like these days I don't even use limiters, right? Like I throw a clipper on my master and I just push gain into it and it just chops the tops off like that, and I like the sound of that. And that's something that took me like 10 years or something to like undue knowledge of at university from people who were like, you can't over compress shit and you can't clip shit and digital clipping's bad and like all this stuff. So yeah, I don't know, how much do you think is like an artistic preference or versus the like a technical sort of thing?
You can do whatever you want, and I agree with you. There really shouldn't be, or there aren't actually any rules around anything. People are going to tell you things, but whatever works for the mix and whatever works for the creative vision is what works. I think what's important is you need, whether it's technical or artistic, you need an ability to be able to discriminate between very small changes in sound. And if you want to relate, if you have a vision in your head of what you want that sound to be like, that's in the artistic world. How do you translate that? How do you actually achieve it? You need to go into the technical world to do that. So I think it's a combination of both. But I think if you're a mastering engineer, the approach is what makes the song work, what works, what serves the song ultimately. It's as simple as that. We've had tracks leave the mastering studio I worked in that we didn't really touch. They were absolutely fine as soon as the artist brought them in, which is the ultimate compliment for the mixing engineer. But a lot of clients, certainly in those days, they wanted things done to their mixes. I mean, they're not, we're not paying you to not touch our mix, even though that's the ultimate compliment for a mixing engineer. It's the equivalent to going to the doctor and paying them whatever you pay them, and they say you're fine. You're paying them for decades of experience to make that judgment call. And it's the
Right.
same with the mastering engineer. So there were clients that wanted things done to their mix, damn it, because we're paying, regardless of whether that was the appropriate choice. I sort of went down a tangent on that one, but that does happen.
Yeah, I suppose like at that point, you're almost just paying for a relief of anxiety, maybe. I feel like quite often before I put something out, I'm always like, fuck, I hope it's okay.
Especially in the bottom end, even really experienced mixing engineers that I had the pleasure of working with would just come in and go, how's the bottom end? That's all they care about, because that's one of the hardest things to get right in small rooms, especially from a monitoring perspective. So they knew the rest of it was fine. But that actually reminds me, I had a client come in one day who hid a 22 kilohertz sine wave tone. Well, didn't hide it, just put it across one of his tracks on one side, on the left-hand side, just to see if I could hear it, like as a test for the mastering engineer. And the VU meters just blew out. I saw it before anything else. I didn't hear it.
Right.
And I couldn't identify what was making this thing happen. And then I asked him about it. He's like, yeah, I put this tone in just to see if you could hear it, just to test you out.
Wouldn't you just see it? Like, I mean, one of the first things I'd do if I'm mastering a track is put like Pro Q or something on it, and it's just a spectrum. You just probably see that big spike, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think I was. We have those spectrum analyzers, or had those spectrum analyzers in front of us, but I noticed it on the VU meters first, and just was looking around to try and find, because I thought it was something in the gear, or something's misbehaving here. I got to check a few things, and yeah, because you blame yourself first, and then eventually find out that you're being tested.
And he was doing it just to like see if you would do anything to the file, or just to see if you could hear it.
He wanted to know if I could hear that frequency, if I could hear that high.
Can anyone hear that 22K? That seems pretty unreasonable.
I would bet money that someone can, definitely.
Okay. Interesting.
But I don't know. What do you mean by hear?
Yeah, exactly. At some point, it's like at some point, like you're just hearing the drivers of your speaker distort, right? Like, because I feel like whenever
there's a sensation, but is that hearing, quote unquote? Like if you're turning it on and off, and you have a physical awareness that there's a change, how, at what point is that hearing and what point that isn't? It's just, you might be hearing your eardrums click, you might be hearing a pressure that's there and not there, but you're not actually hearing the tone itself. You're just aware of a thing.
Yeah, it's like kind of just sound pressure, right? So you're just hearing like it's just a feeling of some sort of pressure.
Of course it's technically hearing, but are you actually hearing that frequency? Probably not.
Are you have you done much training with hearing the difference between files of different bit depths, like 16-bit versus 24-bit and stuff like that?
Yeah, I built a little app that I'll share. It's for A/Bing. So It's an ABX comparator. So there's sound A, sound B. Essentially, you load two different sounds, let's say 16-bit, 24-bit, and then you load it into the app and it will present sound A, sound B, and then sound X. And you have to choose whether sound X is the same as sound A or sound B. And it randomizes the presentation. It gives you 20 questions. And I think if you get 12 out of the 20 right, then that's a statistical difference that you can definitely hear the difference between the two things. The thing about it is that you have to match the loudness. And loudness matching is a subjective exercise. So if you're out by a small amount, you're going to be able to tell a difference between the two files quite easily, when what you're identifying has nothing to do with bit depth. It's that your two files aren't matched in loudness.
Wait, so why is that difficult to match between a 16-bit and a 24-bit file? Is it just because
it's not difficult for you? If I get you to match, so you've got a 16-bit and a 24-bit file, and you need to match the loudness of these two things if we're going to do a listening test, and you personally match that loudness. That might not be the same loudness for me.
But why wouldn't it be if both files were identical? The only difference was the bit depth render.
Oh, sorry, I'm not suggesting that bit depth makes the loudness different. For example, if you were comparing a boost on two different EQ plugins, for example, there might be a change in level. And before doing any listening test, you need to match the loudness of the two files you're presenting. But let's just say there was a difference between these two files, and we need to have them the same loudness so we can compare them in a listening test. What I'm saying is that when you do that loudness adjustment and you make them identical to your hearing, they might not be identical to mine.
I'm still confused, because if I just take say a 32-bit wave file, I put it in Ableton, I take like 16 bars of it, and then I render it out with the render settings saying 16-bit, and then I just render it out again with the settings saying 24-bit. They should just be the same, just the file will be a different bit depth, right? Like in terms of volume, there should be no different. It should be the exact same file, just the bit depth of the files will be different.
Yeah. I'm not suggesting that rendering two different bit depths generates two files that are of different level, but let's just say we were comparing one plugin to another, and you did an identical boost on both plugins, and then you exported the output of that, and let's pretend there was a difference in loudness between those two files for whatever reason. Matching the loudness of those files is tricky because it's a personal and subjective thing. So if you're trying to do a listening test for 100 people in your experiment, and you've needed to match the Pultec EQ versus the PSP EQ, you had to match that output in loudness, and you've done that. That loudness won't necessarily be matched for all of the participants in that experiment because it's a personal and subjective thing.
So is the only way then to actually do that test accurately as a part of the experiment be the very first step? You say to the person, make these two things the same volume, and then render out 100 different files for every participant?
Yep, you're a natural born researcher, Bill. That's exactly what you do. You get them to match the loudness.
Gotcha.
And then you start that experiment.
Right. Did you run this experiment?
I'm trying to think back to the ones that I did. I think we got. There's another way to do it that's kind of accepted as accurate, is getting a group of people to each do a loudness assessment or a matching of loudness of the two things before the experiment, and then use an average of those adjustments for the actual experiment itself. We've certainly done that, where we matched the loudness of sound files as best as we could, and then we presented them to people and asked them to make adjustments if needed, if they were different loudnesses, looked at those responses from people in terms of loudness adjustment, and then used that to inform the experiment, the listening test itself. It's loudness is a strange and tricky thing, and far more complicated than people think it is, and really personal too.
Man, loudness these days has gotten so fucking crazy. Like I remember back, when I was at uni, like I don't even think we were using lofts back then. I think we were using RMS, and like anything that was like louder than, I don't know, -10 RMS, I'd be like, what the hell? But like now it's I run everything on lofts, and I don't put anything out that's like -5 lofts minimum. It's like kind of where I release music.
You have a minimum?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, around -5 lufs is kind of about my minimum.
Yeah, it's
For
interesting. I
for
never.
various reasons. One, I like the sound of it. Like it's for the type of electronic
There you
music
go.
I'm writing. Like a lot of that slammed sort of clipped sound is what makes it sound all gelled together and what makes it sound like a big fat wall of sound. But also, playing it out in clubs, you're playing against other DJs. If you're doing a back to back with somebody else, it's like, they're going to play a file and their file is going to be whatever loudness and your file has to match that. But then, you've got the streaming thing these days. So I try to,
Yep.
sometimes I'll do a separate master for that. But
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that argument that it is the sound, the whatever negative word you want to come up with for limiting dynamic range that much and making it that loud. Again, there are no rules around it, and that is literally part of the sound you're trying to achieve. So,
right. I mean, at the end of the day, to make that file -10 lufs, I'd just be putting like a gain plugin on it and turning it down a bunch of decibels.
yeah, it's not getting any more dynamic range.
Yeah, exactly. It's just getting quieter for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And then it's like your sausage just looks smaller.
Yeah. And there's a lot of those arguments around the sort of loudness wars years ago was, well, users have a volume control. They can turn it up if they want. Well, they can't. At your shows when you're playing, the listener can't adjust anything.
Right. And it's arguable that on Spotify, they can, but a lot of people, they just don't. A lot of people don't. Like, I mean, I'm sure if you looked at the statistics for how many people go into their Spotify preferences and turn off normalization, it's probably 10% of people, if that.
Yep.
I imagine most people
they don't want they want that seamless transition of background wallpaper music.
Speaking of seamless transitions, though, in Spotify, it's like a fucking better DJ than me at this point. It's like they have so many data points. Like the amount of data that Spotify must be hoarding at this point is fucking crazy. But like I'll be sitting there listening to some shit, and I'll be like, wait, what the hell? Did that just change song? And I'll go look at it, and then I'll be like, yeah, shit, it did. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but Spotify will be playing, and like 30 seconds before one track ends, it'll start playing 30 seconds into the start of another track. And it'll
I haven't noticed.
Yeah, exactly. It basically mixes tracks for you. It's like it's just DJs without you telling it to.
Where it just used to be a crossfade, and now it's actually.
I don't know what it used to do, but yeah, now it definitely is like actually doing some shit where I'm like, I'll go back and then listen to tracks before it and be like, oh shit, that's actually like that's an interesting mix. Like that actually just found a thing that mixes really well with that tune.
I might use that.
It's useful. Yeah, I think Spotify is amazing for finding. I've found so much new music because of it, and I think the way that it used to work, I think it's way more complicated now. But I think the way it used to work is it would just find a user that's very similar to you, and then it would just show you each other's likes. And that's how it would suggest new music to you. I think it's more complicated than that now, but I always thought that was really smart. Just find someone that's very similar to you and just goes like, you probably like this, you probably like this. It's basically like you're sitting in a room with someone on YouTube just being like, have you heard this? Have you heard this?
Yeah, find another person that has almost identical musical interests, but rely on the fact that no two people have exactly the same musical interests, and then share what's different.
Right. It's like kind of really smart.
Yeah, it's genius in how simple it is.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of programming is, right. It's like solving a lot of those problems, but people over engineer shit so much. I feel like in a lot of code.
Do not look. Well, you can't, but don't look behind the scenes in mine. I mean, mine's gotten better over time, but organization is something trying to stay in my programming from day one and making it as simple as possible. If I shared my software with the world, it would be refined and made more efficient in seconds. A lot of it isn't super efficient, but
have you watched?
I'm not actually a programmer.
Have you watched those videos of people opening up Autechre's old Max patches? There's a dude on YouTube. He's called I think his YouTube channel is actually just Dude or Dude 397 or something like that. And he's got a few videos where he opens up some of the old Autechre Max patches, and they're just a mess of like signal processing and wires and objects and shit everywhere. And he'll be like, "Oh yeah,
screenshot years ago."
Yeah, he'll be like, oh, we don't need all this anymore. And he'll just delete like a quarter of the patch and just put like one object there that just does all of that shit.
Yeah, and now they've got the multi-channel. The updates to that software are just incredible. It's maintained and expanded, by the day. It's I can't say enough good things about Max.
Owned by Ableton now, right? Or I mean, at least I think Ableton bought Cycling 74, and that's how they got Max into the Max for Live world.
Yeah, I think so. The other great thing about Max that isn't actually about Max is there's a Facebook group for Max. And if you have a question or you don't know how to do something or you're stuck on a problem, you post it there and the problem is solved in 6 different ways in 3 minutes. It is the least, and it has absolutely no off-topic posts whatsoever and no spam.
It's just like the Stack Overflow for Max MSB or whatever.
Yeah, it's the most professional social media group I've ever seen.
That's awesome. What is the group called?
It's just Max MSP
Oh, gotcha.
on Facebook.
Oh yeah, I think I'm a part of that one actually. Yeah,
the posting things on there, I've posted a few questions around how to do things, or I'm in a jam, and the responses are literally minutes later. And there's 3 or 4 different ways to do it, depending on what you want to do, which is, that's Max, right? You get two different people to add one and one together, and you got 2 different looking patches.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome where the state of the internet is these days. I remember back when I was at uni trying to ask people questions on the internet, it was like the best you had was those shitty fucking PHP forums. It was either like a bunch of sexist names like Gear Sluts or Muff Wiggler or some shit like that, or a bunch of other weird, like Ableton PHP forum was one of them. And
asking a bunch of old dudes.
Yeah, exactly. And they're all basically like, oh, you're definitely going to want to buy this piece of hardware to solve your software problem.
Yeah, they should have had a forum called Black T-shirt. That's what they should have had. with dandruff on it and grey hairs on the shoulders.
Right.
I think back in those days when you were at SAE and people were writing to engineers like Sylvia Shivy-Massey and they'd reply, because the world today, everyone has, you can look them up on Instagram or whatever. Your ability to contact quote unquote famous engineers is really simple. Whether they reply to you or not is a different thing. But 12, 15 years ago, they were quite surprised that you'd reach out and contact them, and they weren't inundated at those stages with all the different contact requests, and they'd reply to our students and were really generous with their time. Bob Ludwig, Bob Katz, all of those kind of famous old school engineers were happy to, give advice to students, because I think the requests were so few and far between. But now that they're so contactable, they must get thousands of requests a day. And
yeah, I actually added David Miles Huber to Facebook when I was at uni, and I chatted with him for hours on there. It's crazy.
Wow.
It was like the dude who basically wrote the book that we're mostly following there. And
Modern recording techniques, right?
Yeah, he's happy to chat with me for all the time.
Excellent.
Great. Yeah. Do you know much about this MP3 V0 thing? I literally just saw a thing about it this morning. I'd never seen it before. And I was like, what the fuck is that? And I was like, maybe I'll ask Mark about it.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's like some different packaged up version of MP3. I guess like the you had like the VBR, CBR, and now you have this V0 thing. I don't know.
I will look into it.
Yeah.
Or just listen to your next podcast. Yeah. You can ask your next guest and hopefully they say yes. Oh yeah, I know about that.
Right. Yeah, who would know about that? Probably somebody who uses LimeWire a lot or something.
Someone from the Fraunhofer Institute or something like that.
Right. Yep. Well, hey man, thanks a lot for doing this. It was good chatting with you, and yeah, it's good to catch up, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. We'll do it in another 10 years.
Yep, sounds good.
See what happens.
All right.
Cheers. I'll
hit stop
send
on
you
this.
all my files and things.